Gemini has always been seen as the sign of the quick mind, the easy word, and endless curiosity. But what almost no one notices, and here lies the unsettling point, is that this image is only the surface. While the world tries to decipher Gemini by what they say, true Geminian power operates in silence, in unspoken thoughts, in invisible connections that form even before any action takes place. That is exactly why the 5 gifts that even witches don't know Gemini has are not easily identified. They do not belong to the obvious plane. Since ancient times, witches, alchemists, and scholars of the occult have tried to understand how some people can foresee changes, escape traps, and move between realities without leaving traces. What few dare to admit is that Gemini is born with this ability already activated. Not as ritualistic magic, but as a rare form of intuitive intelligence. A gift that blends logic, sensitivity, and temporal perception. Gemini feels before it happens, understands before it is explained, and reacts before danger reveals itself. This is the sign that sees multiple truths at the same time. While others need certainty, Gemini navigates comfortably within doubt, because all possible scenarios have already been analyzed. This is not indecision. It is silent calculation. That is why Gemini is so often underestimated, misunderstood, or labeled as unstable. The truth is far more unsettling. Gemini is always several steps ahead, observing, absorbing, and recording everything. And here is the detail that disturbs the most. When Gemini falls silent, it is because everything has already been understood. When they pull away, it is because the ending has already happened mentally. There is no spell, promise, or emotional manipulation capable of holding someone who has mastered their own detachment. This inner control is one of the most powerful gifts, and also one of the most invisible. What you are about to hear is not empty praise nor a horoscope stereotype. It is a deep dive into the 5 gifts that even witches don't know Gemini possesses. Gifts that confuse, unsettle, and challenge any attempt at control. If you are a Gemini, be prepared to recognize yourself on a profound level. If you live with a Gemini, be prepared to understand why they were never as predictable as you thought. Stay until the end. Because the 5th gift reveals why, when a Gemini decides to move on, the entire universe feels it. Do you want to know what the 5 gifts that even witches don't know Gemini has are, and why they are so unsettling? Stay until the end because the number 5 completely changes the way you see this sign. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Your energy strengthens this space and connects us even more deeply to the universe of the signs. The gift of seeing multiple realities. Gemini does not perceive the world in a linear way. While most people see only what is directly in front of them, Gemini accesses simultaneous layers of reality. This gift is neither fantasy nor mystical exaggeration. It is a rare combination of mental intelligence, intuitive perception, and sensitivity to invisible details. That is why Gemini often seems ahead, disconnected from the present, or even distracted. In truth, their mind is operating on several planes at the same time. This gift manifests in the ability to understand different versions of truth without clinging to just one. Gemini can step into another person's perspective, anticipate reactions, foresee consequences, and map future scenarios before any decision is even made. Where others need certainty, Gemini moves naturally within complexity. They understand that reality is not fixed. It shifts according to perception, context, and intention. This awareness expands their vision and makes them extremely adaptable. For this reason, Gemini rarely reacts impulsively. Even when they appear lighthearted or carefree, their mind has already analyzed risks, opportunities, and possible outcomes. This silent calculation often leads others to mistake them for indecisive. But the truth is that Gemini is not stuck between choices. They have already mentally walked through all of them. They know what each path offers, what each decision demands, and what each alternative can destroy or build. In the emotional realm, this gift is even more evident. Gemini perceives subtle changes in people's behavior, a silence that feels out of place, an avoided glance, an energy shift with no logical explanation. They sense when something is about to collapse long before the signs become visible. That is why they often pull away without explanations. It is not coldness, it is clarity. They have already seen the reality that was forming. This gift also explains why Gemini struggles with labels. They are not just one thing, nor do they belong to a single role. They move between versions of themselves, adjusting to circumstances without losing their essence. This unsettles those who need fixed definitions, but it is precisely this fluidity that protects Gemini from emotional traps, manipulation, and repetitive cycles. Seeing multiple realities is a powerful but lonely gift. Not everyone can keep up with Gemini's mental speed or understand decisions that seem sudden but were contemplated for a long time. Even so, this gift keeps them one step ahead of chaos. Because while the world reacts to what has already happened, Gemini has already understood what is still about to happen. The gift of absolute adaptation. Gemini possesses an ability that few signs can sustain without losing themselves. Absolute adaptation. This is not merely about getting by in difficult situations, but a profound capacity to read the environment, understand its invisible rules, and adjust with intelligence, speed, and precision. Where others resist, break, or shut down, Gemini reshapes themselves, without self-erasure. This gift is born from a flexible mind and a watchful eye. Gemini observes first, acts later. They understand the tone of conversations, the energy of a place, people's behavior, and even what is left unsaid. In just moments, they know how to position themselves. That is why they can move between different worlds, opposing groups, and contradictory realities without conflict. It is not falseness. It is strategic reading of reality. Gemini's adaptation is not passive. It is active, intelligent, and conscious. Gemini chooses when to speak, when to remain silent, when to advance, and when to retreat. They shift language, adjust posture, and change approach according to the situation. This ability makes them unpredictable to those who try to control them, because there is no single way to reach them. When the environment changes, Gemini has already changed with it. This gift reveals itself most strongly in moments of crisis. When everything collapses, Gemini does not panic. They analyze, absorb information, and find exits where no one else can see them. While others cling to what was lost, Gemini reorganizes mentally and creates new possibilities. That is why they tend to recover quickly from losses, ruptures, and new beginnings. They understand that nothing is fixed, and this awareness sets them free. In the emotional realm, absolute adaptation can make Gemini seem detached. But what truly happens is that they do not cling to versions of things that no longer exist. When they realize that a relationship, bond, or environment no longer makes sense, they adjust internally before physically pulling away. This silent process avoids drama but also causes confusion. People do not realize that Gemini had already been preparing to leave. This gift also explains why Gemini rarely becomes trapped in the past. They learn, record, and move forward. Not because they did not feel deeply, but because they understand that insisting on what does not evolve is a form of stagnation. Their adaptation is not escape, it is conscious survival. Absolute adaptation is what makes Gemini resilient, versatile, and always in motion. They do not need the world to remain stable to feel secure. They trust their own mind. And that is exactly what makes them so difficult to break, limit, or define. The gift of emotional mind reading. Gemini possesses a silent and deeply unsettling gift, emotional mind reading. This is not guesswork or assumption. It is the rare ability to perceive what people feel, think, and hide without a single word being spoken. Gemini reads the environment like a living map, decoding microgestures, pauses in speech, subtle shifts in tone, and above all, variations in emotional energy. This gift is born from the combination of an analytical mind and heightened sensitivity. While many listen only to what is said, Gemini listens to what is avoided. They notice when a smile is forced, when a response comes too late, or when silence carries more meaning than any explanation. That is why Gemini is rarely deceived by appearances for long. What is misaligned always reveals itself to their perception. Emotional mind reading makes Gemini seem as though they know too much. Many people feel exposed around them even without understanding why. This happens because Gemini picks up on inner contradictions. Words that do not match actions, promises that do not carry true energy, affection that does not support the narrative. Gemini does not confront immediately. They first observe, confirm, and understand. Their emotional intelligence is strategic, not impulsive. This gift also explains why Gemini withdraws before conflicts erupt. They sense emotional while it is still in its early stages. They notice when admiration turns into envy, when interest becomes convenience, or when affection begins to cool. Upon recognizing these signals, Gemini prepares internally. When they finally distance themselves, it seems sudden to others. To Gemini, it was simply the conclusion of something that had already become clear. In relationships, emotional mind reading makes Gemini extremely attentive to subtle dynamics. They feel when they are no longer a priority, when care diminishes, or when the connection loses depth. They do not demand explanations or beg for attention. They observe. And when they understand that reciprocity no longer exists, they emotionally disengage with striking clarity. This gift, however, comes at a cost. Because they feel so deeply and perceive so early, Gemini learns to protect their own mind. They become selective about who they truly allow close. Not everyone is ready to be read. Not everyone can withstand the silent truth that Gemini sees. Emotional mind reading is an invisible but decisive power. It guides choices, avoids traps, and preserves Gemini's emotional integrity. Because, in the end, those who see beyond words never get lost in illusions. The gift of invisible reinvention. Gemini masters one of the most misunderstood gifts of the zodiac: invisible reinvention. Unlike loud changes or displayed transformations, Gemini changes in silence. While the world believes everything remains the same, something profound has already been rebuilt within. This gift allows Gemini to move through ruptures, losses, and endings without announcements, without drama, and without seeking validation. Invisible reinvention begins in the mind. Gemini observes what no longer works, questions old patterns, and internally dismantles everything that has lost meaning. They do not change on impulse, they change through understanding. When Gemini decides to transform, they have already gone through long internal processes of analysis, acceptance, and detachment. That is why, when the change finally becomes visible, it seems sudden, but in truth it was completed long ago. This gift explains why Gemini often surprises people. Someone who once seemed available, present, and connected suddenly appears distant, different, or unreachable. It is not coldness. It is silent evolution. Gemini understood something others have not yet perceived. They mentally crossed the ending while others were still insisting on the middle. Invisible reinvention also protects Gemini from stagnation. They refuse to remain in roles that no longer reflect who they are. When an environment, a relationship, or a version of themselves becomes limiting, Gemini withdraws, reorganizes, and is reborn. All of this happens away from the spotlight, because their transformation does not depend on external approval. In the emotional realm, this gift is even more evident. Gemini processes pain, disappointment, and loss internally. They feel deeply but do not expose their wounds. They prefer to understand the lesson, reorganize emotionally, and move forward with lightness. When they return to the world, they no longer carry the weight that once held them back. This gift, however, is often misinterpreted as excessive detachment. People do not see how much Gemini suffered before changing. They only see the final result, not the process. They do not realize that each reinvention required introspection, silence, and difficult decisions. Invisible reinvention is what makes Gemini resilient and untouchable. They do not need to destroy in order to begin again, nor to announce in order to evolve. They simply transform. And when the world notices, Gemini is already on another level. More aware, freer, and impossible to imprison. The most unsettling gift: mastery of detachment. Among all of Gemini's gifts, this is the most unsettling, the most feared, and the least understood: mastery of detachment. This is not coldness, indifference, or lack of feeling. On the contrary, Gemini feels deeply. But they possess the rare ability to emotionally disconnect once they understand that a bond is no longer true, reciprocal, or evolving. This control does not come from ego, it comes from clarity. Gemini senses the ending before it happens. Through emotional mind reading and the vision of multiple realities, They recognize when a relationship, friendship, or situation has passed the point of return. While others insist out of fear of loss, Gemini evaluates the emotional cost of staying. And when they understand that remaining means diminishing themselves, they choose to leave, in silence. Gemini's detachment begins in the mind. They reorganize thoughts, accept reality, and cut expectations before cutting physical ties. That is why, when they withdraw, it seems fast, definitive, and even shocking to those left behind. But the truth is that Gemini has already lived the grief internally. They cried in silence, reflected, understood, and closed the cycle long before the visible departure. This gift is unsettling because it cannot be reversed. When Gemini disconnects, there is no drama, emotional blackmail, or promise that can bring them back to what they have already understood as finished. They hold no resentment, but they also do not revive what has lost meaning. Their detachment is clean, conscious, and irreversible. This frightens those who believe control comes from emotional dependence. In relationships, this gift manifests with even greater intensity. Gemini loves with mental and emotional depth, but they do not cling to illusion. When they perceive coldness, disloyalty, inconsistency, or ongoing disinterest, they shut down internally. The person may still be physically present, but emotional access has already been closed. And once that happens, there is no return. Mastery of detachment is also a form of self-preservation. Gemini understands that persisting in what hurts is a way of abandoning oneself. That is why they would rather lose people than lose themselves. This choice requires emotional maturity, courage, and a high level of self-awareness, qualities few recognize in this sign. This gift makes Gemini emotionally impossible to imprison. They can love, connect, and share, but never at the expense of their own integrity. And that is precisely why, when a Gemini decides to move forward, the impact is silent, deep, and final. Gemini is not confusing. They are complex. They are not unstable. They are too aware. While many remain trapped in what is visible, Gemini moves in the invisible realm, where thoughts form before words, where decisions are made before actions, where silence speaks louder than any explanation. Their gifts do not seek attention, make noise, or demand recognition. They operate strategically, deeply, and quietly. Perhaps that is exactly why even witches cannot decipher them. Gemini sees what others ignore, feels what others deny, understands the ending before it arrives. And when they move on, it is not escape, it is clarity. It is the awareness of someone who knows that staying where there is no truth is the greatest form of imprisonment. And now I ask you, have you ever felt the hidden power of a Gemini? Have you noticed that behind the lightness, there is a sharp mind, a rare perception, and a force impossible to control? If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, because here the universe of the signs is revealed beyond the obvious. Leave your comment. Your experience may awaken someone who does not yet understand what they are living. Share this video with someone who needs to see Gemini through different eyes. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss any message that might arrive at exactly the right moment. Because some content is not just video, it is a sign.